Hey guys, Taria from urbansketchingworld.com here. Today I'm doing a sketch of a very cool pub called the Blackfriar, which is in Blackfriars, London. I used to work right next to it, just down Queen Victoria Street there. And I've just always wanted to draw it, but I worked next to it about 8 years ago, and I've just never got round to sort of sketching it. So I'm over in South Africa at the moment, but I found a cool picture of the pub and I thought I'd give it a go. So here I am, I'm working on CANSON XL watercolor paper, which I got from a local art shop here, and it's pretty affordable paper, and it's actually pretty good, you know, for this kind of illustration where you're not doing a huge amount of watercolor washes on top of washes. Where it's more of a line and wash kind of situation. It's actually a really cool kind of affordable paper, and it's a ring bound paper. It's A4 size, but it's actually got like a kind of pre-cut bits just before the ring binders there, where you can actually tear off the paper cleanly. So I think that's really nice. I actually listened to an interview with, who was it? I think it was James Richards, the urban sketcher James Richards, and he said he worked on a pad of paper that had that same kind of pre-cut area, so he could just, oh no, it was a Stillman and Burn ring bound sketchbook, so he could just tear out a drawing if he needed to, if he wanted to sell it or something. I just found that very interesting. So yeah, I highly recommend this paper it's a cold press paper, so it's got a bit of texture to it, but it's not very textured, so it's great for drawing on with fine liners, and doing like kind of a light watercolor wash on. So as you can see, I've done sort of a pencil sketch. I'm actually using a 4B pencil there. Usually I use a mechanical pencil, but I got this 4B pencil the other day, so it's kind of nice just to do soft lines that erase easily, rather than my HB mechanical pencil, which I feel sometimes could possibly damage the surface of the watercolor paper, especially if you're erasing and redrawing. I think it's better to use a softer pencil. And then at the moment there I'm using a COPIC MULTILINER, which is a 0.2. It's one of the refillable ones, so it's slightly more expensive, but it's a bit more environmentally friendly because you can actually refill it. And then the pen on the left there, which I'm occasionally using, is, I don't know how to say this, it's a TWSBI, so TWSBI Eco fountain pen, which I also bought from a stationery shop, rightgear.co.za, here in South Africa. Oh, see, this is the cat, Jemima, trying to walk all over my sketch. As soon as I'm sketching and filming, she's like all over me. Otherwise she doesn't want to know, but you know, I guess that's cats for you. No, she's a cutie. So that's, yeah, the TWSBI Eco fountain pen with an extra fine nib. Absolutely love it. Really recommend this pen. And the whole pen itself is a converter, so you don't put a cartridge in it. It's the pen body is actually a converter, so you would need a bottle of ink with that pen. If you're interested, I've got a whole video of me receiving that pen and the Lamy LX fountain pen, which you can watch. I'll put it in the top right corner here. That shows you kind of me unpacking them and explaining them a bit more. But yeah, that's a great pen. But I like the fine liners. This is the first time I've used a Copic fine liner. I usually use Microns or Uniballs, just because where I live in the UK, that's usually what's at hand. Here in South Africa, the Copics were in the shop, so I got those. Really like them. Really nice to draw with. And I decided mainly to go with a fine liner just because I wanted like quite a consistent line, and just to make it a bit more illustrative. But yeah, I do use the fountain pen, and in a bit you'll see me use the Lamy fountain pen, just because even though the Lamy LX that I got is still it's still an extra fine nib, but it's thicker than the TWSBI one. So here I'm just drawing on the windows. So I tend to sort of start with a loose pencil sketch. If it's quite complicated, I'll do more in pencil than I would usually do, just to make sure I kind of get proportions right. I definitely haven't got the proportions right on the windows in this building, but it doesn't really matter. It just kind of lends that kind of, you know, exaggerated proportion, kind of almost cartoony kind of vibe, so it really doesn't matter too much. So here I'm using the fountain pen just to give some lines the extra weight, so like underneath where the balconies are, and or the window kind of areas, and just where some shade would be behind the Blackfriar there, just where the shadows would be. You want to add some extra dark lines that will really add some impact to your watercolor sketch. So, and then I'm colouring in these signs with a black MICRON brush pen, and that will make it really black, and that's because I'm gonna write on them in white gel pen later on, so the blacker it is, the more the white gel pen will show up. So now I'm just doing the surrounding kind of areas. I don't want them to be very prominent, so I'm using a couple of grey Tombow markers that I bought at the shop. I only have these two shades, so I'm just kind of working with what I've got here. But it just kind of adds to the scene, but like it's knocked back a bit, you know, so it's not too prominent, but it's like kind of in the background there. So that's over to the right. I could have just drawn the pub, but I felt like I wanted to just add a bit of extra context by adding those, the railway bridge and stuff to the right hand side there. So now I'm going in with watercolour. These watercolours are St. Petersburg White Nights watercolours. I bought them as a 14 set in a metal tin. Usually you get them in a plastic box as 12, 24, or 36. They're pretty affordable watercolours, and they're really pigmented. They're really nice watercolours to use, so highly recommend them, especially if you're just starting out and you want something a bit better than just like the kind of Winsor Newton Cotman range that seems to be like the most popular kind of cheaper range of watercolours, even though in some countries they're actually not cheap at all. Really recommend the White Nights watercolour. They're really nice to use. Oh, here we go. So here's the Lamy fountain pen in the bronze kind of colour there. So I'm just using that for like where I need thicker lines. I don't really need to like change all these pens, but it's just because they're there at hand and I know what they can kind of do, so I just pick them up because I know it can do the job. But like you could literally just do this with one pen. It's just because they're next to me, I'm using them. The ink that I'm using inside the fountain pens is platinum carbon ink, which is a permanent fountain pen ink, and obviously waterproof and stuff. Generally inks that are made to be used in fountain pens are not waterproof, so you kind of have to be careful with that. And some art shops will tell you that you can't even fill fountain pens with waterproof ink, but you can. And one of the options is platinum carbon ink, which I really like, which you can find on Amazon. I'll put the links below in the description. So here I'm just using the Lamy fountain pen, and I'm just using a bit of paper just to not get my hand all over the painting, just like hand oils and stuff, and just trying not to smudge anything, you know. I like to do windows on my illustrations. I like to do them black a lot of the time because I just think it gives it loads of impact, and it almost kind of gives it like a graphic novel kind of feel sometimes, and I just really like it. It's a tip that I picked up from Ian Fennelly. I think it's Ian Fennelly, maybe some other sketchers who are just like, just do the windows black, it looks really cool. And I'm just doing a bit of hatching there on the side there just to give that pavement bit a bit of texture. A lot of the time when I'm sketching, I'm just kind of experimenting, to be honest. Like using these Tombow markers is another kind of thing I picked up from Ian Fennelly. I kind of use them tentatively, but I like in this drawing just using the shades of grey because I just like using a bit more of a limited palette, especially on a building that's like slightly more complicated. There's a lot going on in this sketch, so kind of like using the shades of grey and blacks and then just using certain pops of colour. So I've got that kind of yellowy ochre kind of vibe going on in the top, and later on I'll sort of add the greens to the signs and stuff, and those are kind of the only pops of colour. It gives it a bit more impact, I think. In case you're curious about what watercolour brush I'm using for basically the majority of this painting, it's actually a travel watercolour brush. So I don't know if you can tell, but the handle comes off the end there, and you can then turn the brush part around and put it inside the handle so that it protects the bristles. It's made by Rosemary and Co, who are an amazing paintbrush company based in the UK. And it's a dagger brush, so I think it's the only dagger brush in the travel format that they sell. I forget what size it is, but I think it's the only one, which basically means that it's got like it's been kind of cut at a diagonal, so it's got this really amazing point on it, but then if you press harder then it can cover larger areas as well. It's super handy so that you can do detail work as well as cover a bit of area. And I know it's one of Liz Steele, an urban sketcher from Australia. I know it's one of her favourite brushes. She doesn't use this travel brush version, she uses another version, a larger version, but I know it's basically the brush that she uses 90% of the time, just because it's so versatile, where you can paint those fiddly details but you can also cover the larger area, depending on how much pressure and what part of the brush you're using. So again, I'll put the link to the brush below, but I highly recommend it. It's a great brush. So I'm just putting the finishing touches to the painting, just adding in a few extra darks. You know, it's always difficult to know where to stop really, but I think you finally get to a point where it's like, I'm not sure adding anything else will help. However, after I stopped filming this, I did obviously add a few extra bits because I can't help fiddling with it. But here's the final painting anyway. You can see I did a few splashes and I added in a few bricks on the wall. But yeah, that's pretty much it. I hope you enjoyed watching this video, and please do visit my website urbansketchingworld.com for loads of free tutorials, resources and inspiration about urban sketching. Thanks very much, and I'll see you in the next video.